My name is Jimmy Maxwell, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Jimmy Maxwell.
Well, I mean, there's nothing nice happens to people that come through there with bad charges, and you're not going, and I don't honestly don't have any sympathy for them. The staff will say, the fucking administration, and they get mad and stuff because it happens to them. But underneath it all, they're not that mad. They're pretty, everybody hates that kind
They shouldn't even put them in population, I don't think,
Well, they try it all the time. It's not because the people that's in charge of the prisons are okay with it, really. It's because the people in Washington or somebody, even the state, they're being told what to do by the feds. They'll tell them, you have to do this. You have to integrate your selling thing. And so the only, or something crazy, something that just does not fly in prison. And so they tell them to enforce these things, like you just put them people out there so that they're supposed to be on, and you protect them. I mean, are you kidding me? All you're doing. And then, it's just half the guards will be like, they don't like them either. They'll be like, hey man, this guy.
Yeah, they'll put them out there.
Yeah, that's bad. Absolutely. I mean, and that's a good thing, really. But like I said, I'm not out trying to hurt nobody, and I'm not going to tell anybody to hurt anybody. But I don't have any sympathy for that. That's just the way that it is, and they should put them somewhere else.
And we're talking about like when you were in prison before. This is years and decades ago, or have you came across people with bad charges? And like, when you walk into a prison, people are talking to you and they seem like cool people, but then you find out, boom.
Oh, man.
Paperwork's bad.
Listen, brother. I mean, my personal experience is, listen, I ran into a guy one time that had my wife's best friend. She's like a second cousin. And it was a very personal thing to me because, I mean, we were all on the streets at the time when this happened, when her happened. And I had just left them at the bar. And these guys came in and they're like, and her and her husband said, yeah, you just missed Jimmy. And they're like, oh my God, man, we really like to see, we wish we would have seen Jimmy, And they acted like they were my friends. And so her and her husband got in a fight, and he burned off and left her like an idiot. Well, she thought for sure she could get a ride home with them. I mean, they're friends. Even though her husband wasn't really anybody, but she counted on the fact that they were my friends, which she told me this later after the fact, which I don't know if she was trying to make me feel the way I did, but it worked. And it made it very, very personal to me. And eventually, they took her out and they did all kinds of bad to her. It was they robbed her, dumped her out naked on the street, and she ended up getting picked up and taken to the hospital. And so the cops were all involved. And
are you on the streets at this time, or
I was on the streets at the time. And when I found out what happened and who did it, I had my wife at the time look up every Randy Staggs in the book in Oklahoma City. And she finally found somebody that said he's not here right now. And so we went over to that place about 3:00 in the morning, and I had a 38. My wife, I didn't have Mike, is Michelle's, the one that got husband. He wasn't, none of it, they weren't with us. It's just me and my ex-wife. And we found this house, but the truck that she described wasn't there. But I knew it was their house. I can't remember why, but one of the windows was open, and I told my wife at the time, I said, if that had been you, I said, I'll tell you what, and I should just do it right now. I'd go through that window and I would take whoever's in that freaking house. If it's his mama, I don't give a fuck. I would take them and make them come to me, and she's like, I said, you know what? It's 3:00 in the morning. There's nobody out here. I mean, I could just do this. And she's like, no, you can't do that. This is Mike's. It's right to do this. It's not your right to do this. And I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right.
You mean the husband? It's the husband.
The husband's right.
Yeah.
He'd been in prison. What I mean? Hell, he was a ex-con. And, to me, in my mind, I'm like, that made, you're absolutely right, 100%. So let's go over there right now. You know what I mean? So I drove my ex-wife. We drove over there. I sent her in there to go take the girl, Michelle, to another room. And I pulled him to the side and I said, I found their house. I found their freaking house. This is what I would do. And I got, and I said, listen, I got a gun and we'll go over there and I'll help you. I mean, because I feel responsible a little bit. And I said, listen, I'm down. Let's handle this. And he's like, Jimmy, now listen, I didn't understand this at that time. Now they had a daughter. I do understand a little more now than I did, but at that time in my life, what he said, Jimmy, our lives have been turned upside down so bad right now. I don't want any more trouble. And I was white. I was blown away. I couldn't even understand that. I couldn't even fathom what he was saying to me like that. It changed my opinion of him like that. And not that I completely quit with him after that, but I mean, I just stumbled out of his house. I told my ex-wife, like, Mary Jo, come on, let's get out of here. I couldn't even understand it. And but I dropped the whole thing. And anyway, those guys got caught because of what they did and how they dumped her out, and she had to go to the hospital. She knew who they were, whatever. So they got caught. And then the trial, the whole trial thing was coming up, and she didn't have the most spotless past and everything. And there was some things about her past that she didn't want her husband to know, and this and that. And so my wife was telling me this, and I got a hold of her and I told her, listen, just drop the charges and I'll handle it. Just let them out. You know what I mean? And I just about had her convinced that to do that. And when they pled guilty to robbery, and that was in there, but it was buried, and so they sent them to prison, two of them, brothers. I was still out on the streets at the time, and like I said, I still talked to them, and I watched Michelle. She had a really rough time. I didn't understand victims at that time like I do now. I mean, it changed my opinion of how that. I saw what she went through. It was rough. It was really deep-seated thing. I mean, it wasn't like you just went out and got taken advantage of. It was a scarring event for her, and I watched it develop, and it just, like I said, it was a personal thing to me because of what she told me. And
did they get years in prison for this?
Yeah, they got 25 years.
25. Holy.
Which is nothing really compared to, like, I got 50 for 5 grams of. You know what I mean? That's like, it's insane how they do. 25 is still big sense. Don't get me wrong, but it's not. I mean,
no, yeah.
Anyway, they would ask me, like Mike would ask me, hey, you've got all these friends and these bros and stuff that can I pay them to do something? Because they'd get the victim reports of where they were and this and that. And, to be honest, I wanted to do that. I wanted to help them, but I have a real problem with asking somebody that would put their life on the line for me
when he wouldn't do it himself.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't do it yourself when you had the opportunity. You wouldn't do it yourself, and you want me to ask somebody that's that loyal to me to I just couldn't do it. I mean, so like years later, I was in prison. I was in a private prison where there's no sex offenders supposed to be there, right? I was sitting in the mess hall one day, and a friend of mine named Junior was sitting there digging around his peas and carrots, and he said, "Hey, man, Randy Staxx?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know the motherfucker." I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, he just got here last night." I said, "Where the f is he at?" He said, "Oh, he's over there in the chow line." And I looked over and I saw that motherfucker, and I just turned my brain. I don't know what happened to me, but I it just turned white. And so I just got up. I went through my tray and deal into the trade deal, and I walked out, and I was headed straight to my unit. And a couple of my friends saw me, and they're like, "What's wrong with you? What's going on?" I said, "I need a knife. Get me a knife." I didn't even own a knife at the time. You know what I mean? I didn't have to. But, if I needed one, there was plenty around. And so but doesn't seem like there was a single knife around when I needed it right then.
Nobody wanted to give it to you, right?
And then my buddy, he's an older guy than, and he'd been with me for many years around. And, he just knew the look. And then he asked me what's going on. And I told him. He said, "Oh my God, no, you can't." He just knew I was going to, kill the guy. And he said, "No, man, what about your kids?" And I'm like, "Just get the fuck away from me. I don't want to hear it. It's not no time I'm not thinking about none of that. I'm dealing with this, you know what I mean? And just get the fuck away from me," because he was saying a lot of good stuff, things that would get in my brain if I listened, and I just couldn't deal with it. So I just shoved past him, and I couldn't keep looking for a knife because he was following me around like, you know what I mean, chirping in my ear. So I just grabbed a belt and a couple of locks and headed out. I knew that he was going to be out on the yard as soon as he left the mess hall. And so here I'm going, and Dickie's right behind me, still trying to, great friend, don't get me wrong, but I mean, this is just not the time for it. And I go and I hit I get to the gym. I spot them playing softball out there, and I'm like, I saw the bats laying against the backstop. So I went out there and I scratched the bat up, and I'm scanning the yard at the same time. I'm actually looking for him and another guy, because there was another guy that owed me money, and it was time to deal with him too. And I was like, I'm going to jail, so I might as well take out both of these clowns, if I can, I mean, get my money's worth. Yeah. So, but the one that owed me money wasn't out there, but Skaggs was. Staxx.
Where was he? He was playing softball?
No, he was just over against the wall talking. Matter of fact, he was talking to the guy I was in the mess hall with, eating with, and but Junior did. He didn't really know. I didn't say what happened about it. I didn't say anything. I just, I don't even know what happened. I don't even hardly remember putting my tray up. I just, just saw red, and he's over there talking to him, and I got that bat slung over my shoulder, and I'm headed over towards him, and Staggs is, he sees me over Junior's shoulder, and he's like, hey, Jimmy, what's that? And, he didn't even get the whole thing out before I crushed his freaking collarbone.